Okay, Vinny, do you accept that this has all been handled incredibly badly by the Trump administration? Because I think that's inarguable now, right? I mean, they walked everybody up the hill, and then right at the point that certainly I think a lot of MAGA voters were expecting to have full disclosure on all the Epstein files, Elon Musk suddenly goes public and says, bombshell. Donald Trump's, the biggest bombshell is that he's in the Epstein files. 2-3 weeks later, everything is shut down. You don't have to be a mad conspiracy theorist to say, well, what's going on here? I did, and I've known Donald Trump 20 years and like him very much, and I totally accept that he might be completely blameless when it comes to anything involving Epstein of a nefarious nature. But the sequence of events here is not good.
So that is Piers Morgan on the most recent episode of Piers Morgan Uncensored, reluctantly but thoroughly, as I will show you, calling out Donald Trump and the Trump administration for their disastrous mishandling of the Epstein scandal. Now, I assure you that if this implicated a Democratic administration and were handled by a Democratic administration as incompetently and dishonestly as the Trump administration, Piers would be talking about this a hell of a lot more. He is pulling his punches with respect to Trump. But this scandal is so big that even Piers is occasionally having to talk about it. And on this panel, again, reluctantly but thoroughly, he calls out the Trump administration and Trump and goes so far as to defend the Wall Street Journal against Benny Johnson, a MAGA commentator, dipshit moron who's attacking the Wall Street Journal for publishing that creepy Trump Epstein letter. So Piers gets his workout in. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to play here. We're going to continue this one because Vinny Oshana, who is one of Patrick Bet-David's MAGA co-hosts, he's a frequent guest on Piers Morgan, he responds and makes an interesting point.
Absolutely not, Piers, and it's good to see you again.
And you.
But yeah, Piers, and here's the thing, Piers. It's all the people, it's the team around him. Okay, Trump did make a promise, Piers, when he was asked, will you release JFK? Yes. Martin Luther King? Yes. 9/11? Yes. Jeffrey Epstein? Yeah. But with that one, we kind of got to be careful, okay? So it wasn't like he ran on it. It wasn't a campaign promise. But when your team, the Pam Bondis, the Cash Patels, and Dan Bongino, who I admire and I love a lot, are out there on the front lines making all these promises. Piers, you personally, if you had your team of producers and all these people around you, they're speaking on your behalf and they're making all these promises, wouldn't you be like, hey guys, shut the hell, what the hell are we doing?
So this is actually a really good point. Now, I would argue, again, Vinny calls out Trump a bit in a clip I'm going to show you, but like any other MAGA cultist, he's trying really, really hard to avoid calling out Trump directly. He'd rather blame. He's more comfortable blaming Kash Patel, Pam Bondi, and others. But even Vinny, despite his reluctance to criticize Trump, is making the case that, listen, even if Trump didn't promise to release the Epstein files, which he did, and his own former chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, the guy in the end with the kind of button-up shirt, he'll point that out later, even if Trump didn't make that commitment, people whom Trump appointed and who serve at his pleasure are publicly making that commitment. And he's the leader, which means ultimately it's his responsibility. Piers actually goes further and says it's not just the buck stops there. He believes that they did this not only with Trump's permission, but on his orders, gassing up MAGA's expectations.
Are we doing?
Well,
so it's just shady from the
Vinny,
beginning.
I think it's worse than that because we all know how Donald Trump operates. They wouldn't have all been doing that off their own bat, right? They'd have all been doing it because they have been encouraged to do it. They were speaking on behalf of his administration. So something went down, and I don't know what it was, and maybe it was the Elon Musk thing. I don't know what it was. I mean, we've now got the Wall Street Journal obviously publishing what they claimed was a hand-drawn, bawdy letter bearing Donald Trump's name to Jeffrey Epstein at Ghislaine Maxwell's request for his 50th birthday album in 2003. A pair of small arcs donate women's breasts. The future president's signature is a squiggly Donald below her waist mimicking pubic hair. Now, Trump has responded by saying it absolutely wasn't anything that he did. He's now suing the Wall Street Journal. He's suing Rupert Murdoch for billions of dollars. And we'll have to see how that all plays out. But it was no doubt that they were very good friends for a period of time. It's also no doubt that, to his credit, Trump dropped him when he became became knowledge that he was a convicted pedophile, which a lot of other people didn't, including, I don't believe, Ghislaine Maxwell. So I do think there's like life before the conviction and life after the conviction for public figures. If you carried on like Prince Andrew, hanging around a guy who's been convicted of soliciting an underage girl for sex, then I think, I'm afraid, you are then guilty by association, right? You can try and pretend you're not, but
So Benny Johnson, again, one of the most successful and deeply stupid and dishonest MAGA commentators, is about to jump in, and he and Piers Morgan are going to get into it a little bit over the Wall Street Journal letter, or rather the Wall Street Journal article publishing the Trump letter to Epstein and the subsequent lawsuit. We'll get into that in a second. But again, note that even Piers Morgan recognizes that Donald Trump is such that not only does he have command responsibility as being Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, Dan Bongino's boss, but they probably would have only said these things because he ordered them to. So his responsibility is there, and he has an even greater responsibility. And I like that. I like to hear, Trump allies actually call him out because they are very reluctant to do so. So let's get into the heated back and forth, the brief back and forth between Benny Johnson and Piers Morgan.
you are.
Piers, I have a quick question for you.
Yeah.
You've known Donald Trump for 20 years, admittedly, yes? Okay. You've hung out with him in private. You've hung out with him in public. Yes. Okay. Have you ever known him to be a limp-wristed thespian, like a vaudevillian poet that would write enigmatic, mysterious poems to Jeffrey Epstein and then wear some type of French hat and draw beautiful outlines of women scantily clad? Like, does it sound like Donald Trump to you?
I can say two things about that. I'll say three things about that. One, he's never done that to me, okay, in either written or verbal form. Secondly, evidence has come out that he's been quite a doodler in his time. So I don't think he's never non-doodled. And thirdly, as you probably know, Ben, I mean, I've got probably 150 handwritten scrawls from Trump over things he's read about me, emails I've sent him. That's his way he corresponds. He doesn't use email himself. He'll send you back a printout of your email and he'll scrawl with his Sharpie whatever he wants to scrawl. So he's a scrawler and apparently a doodler, but I have never known him write in the way that you're talking about. So it's going to be a really interesting case here. Listen, the Wall Street Journal wouldn't have published that if they weren't convinced it was genuine. But Trump has been emphatic in his denial.
Shouldn't he be calling for them?
Well, no, listen, I don't know.
Apparently, they don't even have the documents. Shouldn't we be calling for them to release every letter?
Right, listen.
Wouldn't that be fair to release? What was Bill Clinton writing Jeffrey Epstein at that time?
Benny, I don't know the answer to the questions you're asking. And it'll be interesting if this actually goes to any actual trial about it.
So, again, Piers, and by the way, I think Piers was employed by Rupert Murdoch. I actually think, if I remember correctly, Piers Morgan Uncensored was financed by Rupert Murdoch until it went independent. So he has a personal, professional relationship with the Murdochs. Rupert Murdoch, who was the founder of Fox News, effectively is the owner of the Wall Street Journal. Piers is a frequent guest, or a semi-frequent guest, I should say, on Fox News with respect to the Five, right? So when Jessica Tarlov is not available and Piers is in the States, he usually sits in as the token liberal, and he doesn't. With all due respect to Piers, Jessica Tarlov is way better at that because she will actually push back on MAGA talking points. Piers hardly ever does. That's just because, again, he grades Trump on a curve, unfortunately. But again, even Piers is like, it seems really unlikely the Wall Street Journal, knowing that Trump was president and knowing, too, that Trump is incredibly litigious and vengeful, would have posted this shit if they didn't have the goods to substantiate it. So good on Piers for, pushing back on this and for debunking, this idea that when Trump says, I've never wrote a picture in my life, I've never drawn a picture in my life, he's like, no, we see plenty of doodles from Donald Trump. So there's plenty to question. There's plenty of evidence to question, plenty of reason to question Trump's account of things, shall we say. Here's the next clip.
And Piers, if you don't mind, Piers, and Benny, the biggest problem is that Truth Social post where Trump goes, hey, listen, if you're still talking about it, why are you talking about it? Then I don't need your support. And it's like, what are you talking about? People like me who've been there since 2016 in Los Angeles, I had to move. I was doing stand-up comedy and acting. You know how much crap I had to go through? Punched in the head because I had a red hat, wasn't even a Trump hat. All the jobs that I missed, all my career suffered from it. Pat, we're ride or die. And I think that's where people were pissed off, is don't just discard us, okay? And just tell us the absolute truth. We just want the truth. Tell us the truth. Tell us what the hell is going on. You know what I mean? Like, it's BS. It's not like there's not
I hear you, because I do think a lot of MAGA voters feel exactly the same way. I think they were deliberately led up a pathway here on the Epstein files that A, it was a really big deal, and that B, there was a lot that the public weren't being told that was available to the authorities, and that the moment the Trump gang got back into power, that this would all be revealed. And then after Donald Trump won, the team carried on revving everybody up. Let me come.
So even Piers is calling this out, that Trump fucked up by attacking his MAGA base. Again, he's doing so reluctantly, but I will acknowledge, I think it needs to be acknowledged, given Piers's platform, his influence, he commands a vast audience. The fact that he, however reluctantly, is thoroughly criticizing Trump and the Trump administration over the mishandling of this is worth noting, because it penetrates an audience that might not otherwise hear it. So in this clip, we hear from former White House Chief of Staff, Donald Trump's Chief of Staff in his first term, Mick Mulvaney.
We're going to fix Vinny's earpiece, I think. Mick Mulvaney, as we're talking, the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, has just sent the House into recess early, shutting down until September to block a vote calling for the release of the Epstein files. He says it's because the Democrats are playing political games. All other votes have been cancelled in order to prevent the vote on Epstein. So the idea of this isn't having real world significant consequences is obviously for the birds. When the House is shutting down and other votes are being cancelled because they can't take a risk of a vote on Epstein, then it's a big deal. And I think it's a big deal because of all the activity on the Trump side before and after the election about these files. What's your view?
I think that's fair. I've never seen this happen before. I've been in Washington for 15 years. I was in Congress for 6. I was in the White House for 4. I don't remember ever seeing Congress just shutting down this early in July and leaving until September. Keep in mind, and I know that's not what this segment is about, but there's a lot of other things that Congress needs to be doing. The federal government runs out of money the end of September, so they're staring at a federal shutdown if they don't pull something off when they get back. This is a big, big deal, and I think it comes back to the point you guys have raised. They don't know how to handle it. Everybody's confused because Trump did make a big deal about this for a long time. I thought rightly so. And then just to sort of turn on a dime and say there's nothing to see here, as a bunch of people scratching their heads. One of the most interesting things I've learned in this interview, there's a bunch of fascinating stuff. When you had Lauren Boebert on there, I don't think you'll find anybody more pro-Trump than Lauren Boebert in the United States House of Representatives. She has signed a discharge petition. That means very little to folks out in the real world. That's the most treasonous thing you can do against your leadership in the United States House. So if there's enough Republicans willing to go against the Speaker of the House and say, you know what, we don't care, we want this stuff to come out, that's also just sort of thumbing their nose at the president. Donald Trump a couple of weeks ago got asked, he goes, what does MAGA really mean? And he said, and he's got the right to say this, he says, MAGA means whatever I say it means. This is putting this to the test. I do think they've stepped here. I think they've already sort of tacitly admitted that by saying they're going to now try to release the grand jury testimony, see if that satisfies everybody. It won't. But they do have a problem here. And for the sake, look, to be perfectly clear, and I don't know if this has been, I think if anybody said this explicitly, I apologize for the repetition. I don't expect there's anything criminal about Donald Trump in these files. Is his name going to be in there? Sure, there's a bunch of names in there, but there's nothing incriminating here. Why do I believe that? Because if there were, the Democrats who have controlled this file for the last 4 years.
And so he goes on to make the case that a lot of others do, that if there was something incriminating about Trump in this file, it would have been released by the Democrats. I don't buy that logic necessarily. But again, if that's the case, if what Mick Mulvaney is saying is true, then it makes Trump's actions even more bewildering because he's reacting with such fear and panic as to indicate and implicate a self-preservation motive.
What the
One more clip.
hell are we talking about?
I totally agree.
Piers is handling it horribly.
Vinny,
horribly.
I completely agree. Mick Mulvaney, just finally, how damaging could all this be? Things seem to be moving at a fast lick here. And I do think this action by the Speaker is just going to absolutely ignite this. Because let's be honest, again, if this was the Biden administration and a Democrat Speaker of the House doing this to shut down a scandal because it may or may not, name Biden in it, all hell would be breaking loose from the other side. So I can only imagine how this is going to play out with the Democrats. You must be thinking Christmas has come early, right when they've been at their weakest point. But what do you think of the political damage that Trump potentially faces here. Because I listen to someone like Vinny, who's always been unbelievably supportive of Donald Trump. He's MAGA personified in so many ways. And I can feel the sense of slight betrayal with Vinny and slight, like, I've been let down here, and I don't blame him. I would do too.
So again, kudos to Piers, however reluctantly, for pointing out the hypocrisy from MAGA. He didn't mention Benny Johnson by name. He could have, about how Benny would be handling it if the shoe were on the other foot, and also pointing out that if he were in Vinny's position, he would also feel betrayed by Trump. One last comment from former Trump Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney, and then we'll call it a day.
I mean, keep in mind, Donald Trump's not running again, but the other Republicans are. I think what you're seeing today with this suspension of Congress is that a tacit admission that they just don't know how to handle this. Lost in a lot of the discussion is the technicalities of the discharge petition would have been ripe tomorrow. So it would have been a privileged motion, and it could have passed as early tomorrow. And I think the House leadership just didn't know how to deal with that. So they tried to sort of take the next 6 weeks and figure out how to explain it, figure they have a better chance of winning in the press than they do on Capitol Hill. But they've got a tiger by the tail. They really do. This is one of the things that I think folks are really upset about is that Donald Trump has made a name for himself keeping his campaign promises.
Yeah.
He's done it on immigration. He's done it on taxes. This is the difference, right? He promised to do this. Now, I know Benny said he didn't exactly promise as aggressively. I don't remember that. I just remember him talking about the Epstein files during the campaign, and folks really are scratching their head. I think at the end of the day, 6 months from now, when we look back at this, if it's done in 6 months, it will be, okay, did Donald Trump create the MAGA movement, or did the MAGA movement create Donald Trump?
We'll find out. Right now, it's looking like Donald Trump did create the MAGA movement. We see that his favorability with MAGA is actually increasing since the Epstein files, even though those same polls and those same MAGA respondents acknowledge that Trump is fucking up on the Epstein files. Like one of those things like, yeah, dear leader's fucking up on this, but he's still dear leader. And if he's actually fucking up on this, I actually have to cling to him tighter. So we'll see what happens, but it could certainly undermine the overall Republican coalition because they didn't just win with MAGA. They also won with right-leaning independents and just independents in general, the Theo Vaughn crowd, the Dave Smith crowd, the Andrew Schultz crowd, and the Joe Rogan crowd. And so this could potentially hurt the coalition in the future, but right now it's not hurting Trump specifically with his MAGA base in the polls. So we'll see what happens. But again, noteworthy that even though Piers has not covered this the way we absolutely know he would if this were a scandal under the Biden administration about Democrats, he is reluctantly but thoroughly pushing back on MAGA in so many ways with respect to Trump's disastrous handling of the Epstein files and calling it out specifically. So worth noting. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.